Hey everybody, welcome back to Engaging the Phenomenon. And today we are honored to have probably the godfather of modern UFO studies, Jacques Vallée. Welcome, Jacques.
Thank you very much. Good morning.
It's an honor to have you back here on Engaging the Phenomenon. And anybody who's watching this is going to be familiar with you. And if they're somehow not, they're brand new to the field, go check out, one of Jacques' books. He has a ton of some of the best books in the field. I think he's one of the most forward thinkers in modern UFO history. So again, it's a true honor to have you on. But one of the reasons we have you on here today is because you wrote a new book recently called Trinity, the Best Kept Secret, and you actually have a second edition now that has included even more data into it. So for people watching and listening to this, can you explain what the Trinity book is about?
Well, this is a case into which I was invited by Paola Harris, who's a well-known Italian reporter and researcher who now lives in the United States and became aware of that case. And the case happened. It's very unusual because the witnesses did not report what they had seen for over 60 years. The case happened back in 1945 in New Mexico. Paola heard of it through a local newspaper in New Mexico that had reunited the two witnesses who had gone off in their separate lives. An object was seen on a ranch 20 miles from the Trinity site of the first atomic bomb in the summer of 1945. The object arrived out of nowhere 2 days after the capitulation of Japan, and it crashed, did a controlled crash on a ranch owned by the family of Mr. Padilla, Faustino Padilla. His son was there taking care of the cattle, taking care of the ranch with a friend of his. The two were kids, but the main witness, the first witness to the crash was actually a bomber pilot who was coming in for a landing at White Sands, inside the very wide desert expanse of White Sands, where the atomic bomb had been exploded just 1 month before. There is an air base. There is an Army air base. The Air Force did not exist in 1945. The pilots were in Army uniforms. And the control tower calls this bomber pilot who is coming in for a landing, asking him to check into a communication tower that has lost power. He circles that big tower, which controls aircraft communication in the north end of the range of White Sands, and sees that the tower has been hit by something. It's bent and it doesn't broadcast anymore. It doesn't communicate anymore. But he also sees an egg-shaped object in the bushes. The bushes are on fire. There is smoke and fire. And he sees two little kids on horseback next to where that apparent accident has happened. So he reports all this to the control tower and to the Army at White Sands. The witnesses that we have investigated, that Paola investigated, and I continued with the one who is still living, were 9 and 7-year-old at the time. Of course, all the adults were in uniform, were either in the European theater or on ships in the Pacific with the Japanese war, which continued. After the death of Hitler, the war was not over. The war continued in Asia, the war continued in Japan. And the two kids know that when there is an accident, you have to bring help to whoever is there. And so they rush to the scene and they discover essentially a large egg-shaped object. They are going to call it an avocado. It's the size of 2 trucks. It's very heavy. It has plowed a boulevard down the hill, stopped against a berm in the landscape. Landscape I've become very familiar with because I've gone there with Paola 5 times to continue to the research on the land and continue to look for additional witnesses around the place. So that's what the book is about, is that entire investigation, which continues.
Yeah, it's interesting because, even in today's current conversation, you have the connection between, UFOs or UAPs and nuclear assets. So what struck you about this case? What stood out about this case, say, compared to Roswell? Roswell is a famous crash retrieval case. This Trinity case was lesser known. What brought you to the Trinity case that stood out?
Well, the Trinity case was not known at all. In fact, when we first published the book, a number of ufologists said, "You're making it up. I mean, if this had happened, we would have known about it." Well, there are very good reasons why it was kept secret by the people who recovered the craft, and we know pretty much who they are, and also by the witnesses. And that's one of the things that was so fascinating about the research, is reconstructing what those times were like. First, it was ingrained in the local population around ground zero that if you see something, you don't talk, because they knew, the army knew that there were spies around. In fact, several of them were caught later and executed. So the whole population knew that you wouldn't talk about when you saw the army doing something. It wasn't for you. It wasn't for you to get into it. So the two kids had been told that again and again and again, and they never spoke. They kept it as their secret for a long, long time, until about 10 years ago, when they were reunited through their school and through other interests that they had that reunited them. One had gone on to the war in Korea, the other one had become a businessman in Washington, and they had gone in different careers. So why wouldn't you find that along with Roswell in the files of the Air Force? Well, there's a number of good reasons for that. There was no Air Force. The Air Force was brought into existence by President Truman 2 years later, in 1947, the year of Roswell. There was no CIA. The CIA was created in 1947. The term flying saucer was not in the English language. Remember, Kenneth Arnold is going to be talking for the first time about flying saucers, about what he saw when he was on his aircraft in the state of Washington over Mount Rainier. So all of that is 2 years in the future. There is no knowledge, there is no awareness in the population of something like flying saucers. And in fact, in the book, in Trinity, there is no disk. The object was not a disk. The object was, as they said, an avocado. It was an oval, egg-shaped object, the size of 2 trucks. The inside was about 12 or 13 feet high. The total height of the object was about 15 feet. I mean, this is not a hoax. This is not a balloon. In various ways, we've estimated the weight of the object. It was between 2 and 4 tons. Yes, it fell after hitting the tower, but an aircraft would have broken into pieces. It's a giant tower, 65 feet tall, controlling communication over the north end of the range. And the object kept going, and it plowed the boulevard down the hill under power. The question for me, when Paola brought me into the case, was about the physics. You know, what is it made of? How much does it weigh? What kind of power could it have been using, and so on, putting it in parallel with other cases. And the book is really about not just one case, because one case is interesting, of course. And, you know, ufologists have always said, you know, let's find the best case. And they say it's Roswell. Well, Roswell is very, very interesting, but there were no witnesses at Roswell. You know, here we have witnesses that we can place at the site before the object arrives. And when it arrives, they watch the accident, they watch the whole thing. And then the two kids are going to watch the recovery, and the recovery is going to take 8 days. So they are going to watch the entire process, and we have all the details. You don't have that at Roswell. There are 3 of the people that, you know, we know their testimony had gone inside the object once it was available on the ground, when before the Army got involved. So we have a very, very good description of the dimensions and of the entire situation. The reason the kids didn't speak, I can take you there to a local eating place. You'll still see the posters from the time, the Army posters, where you have, you know, a smiling GI who says, why don't you have a cup of coffee with me? And we're going to talk about something else. You know, you don't talk about what you've seen. That's not the conversation. Let's have a nice cup of coffee, you and me. Okay. Then you see those posters in the local eating places. And the kids took their father, took Mr. Padilla, father, to the place, and the father had reported it to the state police, to the state authorities, and someone from the state was with him in a patrol car. They go inside, the adults go inside. When they come out, they sit the kids down and they say, look, this is not for you. This is not for us. This is for the Army, it's for the military. You don't talk about this ever, or you're going to get the family into trouble. It's our ranch, it's the family ranch. So we're going to help, you know, the Army in whatever they want to do, but we don't talk about it. It's not for us. And they will follow that for 60 years. They'll never talk in school. When they wanted to talk to each other at school, they would take their lunch, their sandwich, and they would go off and sit down outside the school to talk about what they had seen. Because it kept, you know, it was very vibrant in their minds, and they had dreams, they had nightmares for a number of years afterwards. And when you speak to Mr. Padilla today, his memory of every detail is still very sharp.
Yeah.
So why isn't that in the records? Because I've worked, as you know, I've worked with Mr. Bigelow, I've worked with a cadre of people from the government. I was part of, you know, I helped build the database for the classified project from ATIP, you know, or the Bigelow Aerospace project. And we all had the same clearances. And my co-workers on these projects had never heard of the case. The reason they've never heard of a case is that in the United States, there are at least 3 different ways you can get a clearance for secret knowledge. One is the State Department that has all the foreign country knowledge and so on. and they report through a particular channel. You have the Pentagon that has, all the classified secrets, secret and top secret and beyond top secret, on mainly defense, but also related areas of the government. And then there is the atomic secrets. The atomic secrets are segregated. This object landed on land that was, there was private land, it was a ranch, but it was part of the atomic complex around where the first atomic bomb had been exploded in Project Manhattan. So the secrets were the secrets of Project Manhattan, not the Air Force, not classified as the quote normal military secret. And we know it through different other documents that we found that we know testify to the fact that the UFO secrets in the Atomic Energy Commission and later today the Department of Energy are classified higher than the atomic bomb. And they are still there today. And if you are not working in an area that's related to the nuclear secrets, you would not have access to that device. Again, the Air Force didn't exist at the time. And this was land that was controlled by Project Manhattan, and Project Manhattan owns the crashed object.
And now, is it just that, say, like, for instance, the Atomic Energy Commission or now the Department of Energy has UFO programs, or is it just that they have a reporting system that has that categorized?
Let's jump to the mid-50s, I think 1956. There was a wave of UFOs over Washington that has been brushed away as anomalous radar returns. Well, those radar returns came from a lot of UFOs that were flying, some of which were seen visually by people that I've reported about in my books, who say, no. I mean, they were radar reports, but we went out and we saw them in the sky. And those were not temperature inversions, all those other physics, distractions. Those were real UFOs, and a number of jets went after them, both Navy and Air Force jets. One Navy jet was authorized to shoot at a disk that it was pursuing. They were flying in forbidden airspace over the Pentagon and over the White House. So there was no question of, that the military was going to intervene. The military took off, and that pilot was authorized to shoot. Shot at one of the disks, and a piece broke off. He looked at approximately where it fell, and then there was a ground search, and they found the piece. I know that from two different sources, including the man who was head of the photo interpretation service, initially at the CIA, but became the Armed Forces Photographic Interpretation Service. He was a man who found the rockets in Cuba and told the president about it. So he had been called into that case as well. And at one time he had custody of part of that piece that was broken. And I knew him because I testified at a couple of congressional hearings about the use of computers in government. And he was there, and we compared notes about the UFO subject. That piece that was broken off, a part of it was turned over to the Canadian UFO project. Canada had an official UFO project for a while. The officer who took that piece there told the head of the Canadian project, quote, in the United States, this subject is classified higher than the atom bomb.
Right, the Wilbur Smith memo.
So we know that from, both what happened in New Mexico and that statement in Canada that was put on the record.
But where does that piece of material go within the United States?
I don't know that.
Okay, because yeah, a lot of people speculate.
There are lots of pieces. I mean, with as you may know, Dr. Gary Nolan and I at Stanford have started a study, systematic scientific material study of various kinds of materials that have been recovered. I've turned over my collection, which includes the collection from Dr. Peter Sturrock, also at Stanford, who has published a number of papers about the analysis, especially the isotope analysis of fragments of UFOs or material deposited by UFOs. And we've just published, Dr. Nolan and I, and a couple of friends have just published the first refereed scientific paper in a major astronautics publication, about the analysis of some of those materials. So we hope that publication opens the door for other scientists to do the same thing now. And there are fragments like that all over the place. I have been given some fragments from France that were recovered by the French Space Agency. The French Space Agency had a meeting recently in Toulouse where I spoke about the recovery at Trinity and about programs to continue those scientific analyses. That's ongoing now, and it's just good science. I mean, that's what you do.
Yeah. So sometimes you talk about the control hypothesis, and so in regards to that, right? Do you think that these crafts and these materials are literal things of technology, or and say the entities too? Do you think that they're actual biological entities or a tool for some kind of higher intelligence?
So, that's a big open question that people have sort of resisted asking, but I think that's a right question. Another question that is related is, why should a piece of very advanced technology, I mean, obviously the object at Trinity was high tech. The kids saw when it was on the truck, on the army truck, ready to go, they could look at the underside. The underside was undamaged in spite of the crash, and it would have contained any propulsion system. But it was only about 4 feet by 2 feet. So what kind of propulsion system is it? I mean, there is a whole series of questions that really haven't been asked. I mean, they've been raised, but they haven't been studied very well, by the people interested in the subject. So there's a lot of work to be done. Another thing to be asked is, why would this very sophisticated device come in over the forbidden airspace, where the first atomic bomb has just been exploded a month before, and come out of nowhere and crash there? Is that an accident, or is it a gift? Obviously, that thing still had power. It made sure that it was noticed, and with a fire and breaking the tower, it destroyed communication over White Sands, over parts of White Sands, that had to attract attention of somebody. And then, this was 2 days after the capitulation of Japan and the end of the war. Shouldn't we pay attention to that? Isn't that some sort of signal? And remember, we haven't used the atom bomb. Now we're talking about using atomic bombs again, which, to me is incredible that we would even contemplate that. But, that's the way history works. But the fact is that since those days in 1945, we haven't used the bomb in anything more than experiments or tests. It has not been used in anger. But the temptation must have been really big in the war in Korea, when we had all these people dying, to terminate the war. And it wasn't used in Korea, it wasn't used in Vietnam, it wasn't used in the other contemporary wars by either side. Is that the signal? I mean, we know that those things have been taken very, very seriously at a very high level. The higher level you go in the Pentagon or in other structures of government, the more you find people who know about the history of UFOs and have followed the history of UFOs and are interested in research about UFOs. It's only, at the lower levels that you have all this confusion, look at all the mistakes, look at all the errors, we don't know, we need to do more research, all that, all the academic arguments and so on. But, it's known that there have been very, very discreet meetings at very high level between Russian authorities going back to the USSR and the Pentagon. If only because, whether you believe in UFOs or not, we react to UFOs when we have radar signals that indicate something that potentially could be an attack. And there have been 3 cases just in the US where the B-52s have been alerted in response to mistakes in tracking by the radars, okay? I mean, the radars were tracking something that wasn't an attack, but the procedure was such that the trajectories were such that the alert went up 3 times. And so 3 times we were within 10 or 20 minutes of nuclear war.
This is a speculation, and it's a story kind of about what you said, like the Soviet Union had meetings with the Pentagon about this subject because of the danger it could cause if there was a false alert. So there's a story about something called Starfish Prime or Operation Dominic, where there was a high altitude detonation of a nuclear weapon in the Pacific, and that Starfish Prime incident included a crash retrieval because the EMP that set off took something out and it crashed in the water and was retrieved. Are you?
I don't know about that, but
okay.
I'm certainly not an authority on nuclear policy and so on. In most cases, I think that tests are signaled to other countries so that nobody gets too excited. I mean, it's generally known when a nuclear test is going to take place somewhere, so that there is no reason to hide it because it's going to be visible anyway.
Right. Yeah.
It's going to be known anyways. So, the fact that there was that much interest, and there is that much interest now, I think is highly relevant to that whole history, and it starts at Trinity.
Yeah. And you know, again, with UFO retrievals comes up the idea of or you know, what people are calling now the UFO legacy programs. Is that something that you, in all your research and investigations, have come across the legacy efforts or legacy programs?
You mean of objects that have been recovered and are being studied somewhere?
And
Sure.
possibly, yeah.
Yes. It's, you know, when you work in Silicon Valley, you know, before something can be classified by the Pentagon, somebody in Silicon Valley has to invent it. So you work alongside people who have been part of different programs at different times. And by now, you know, things that were classified, you know, in the 50s or 60s, have somehow resulted in things that we use every day, you know, in computers or in medicine or in something else, and including radioactivity and so on. So it's known that there have been a number of objects or devices that have been, and we know that through Cardinal Corso, of course, and his book and his, you know, his testimony, which in general is absolutely accurate about the devices that he delivered to a number of labs at the request of the Army to have them tested and so on. I had occasion to work with someone from IBM who was a materials, one of the best material scientists at IBM, working on, especially on magnetic memory, who had been given, and he actually showed me a piece of it, he had been given something to test in his lab, because his lab was equipped with very, very special instrumentation. And he had been approached to test it, and you know, it came from a crash, and he could describe the structure, but he had no idea how you would make it, and he had no idea what you would use it for. You know, it was like, you know, like the idea of Leonardo da Vinci, you know, being given a garage door opener. If you don't give him the garage at the same time, he won't know what to do with it. So those things those projects have existed, and there is a pretty good idea of where these objects would have been taken. We know Paula and I know where the Trinity object was taken. It would have been taken first inside White Sands to secure it, but then it wouldn't stay there because there are no labs there. It was just the place where the bomb was assembled. But all the parts of the bomb came from somewhere else. And the somewhere else was primarily Los Alamos, which is, you know, a short distance north of there. You have to, you know, I've had to understand some of the language in New Mexico. Short distance means driving 4 or 5 hours, you know, in New Mexico. Yeah. But Los Alamos is a short distance, by that standard, a short distance from Trinity. And after that, we don't know where it would have gone. But of course, the labs were there at Los Alamos, and all the security and everything else. And from there, it may have been broken up into specialized labs, literally around the country.
And with the new language that's talking about amnesty for people that have participated in those programs, do you see that as something, you know, if that actually occurs, what do you think will happen from there?
I think it has to occur. I think there's too much pressure now. This is something, as you know, I worked many years with Dr. Hynek, and this is something that he kept asking for, you know, in testimony to Congress and in contacts with congressmen in Illinois. He had been close to some of the members of Congress in Chicago and in Illinois, and had occasion to speak with them. And he was always asking for that, you know, give amnesty to these men and these women. I think the idea has been picked up in Congress, and it's absolutely the first thing to do. And that would open an entire new age for the research, because those are the people who, especially in the military, but in other related areas, those are the people who were there.
And
it may not be that easy, because, you know, in going through the Air Force files, which are mostly unclassified. As you may know, I spent 4 years with my wife going through the Air Force files and redoing the classification. You know,
and that's when you found the Pentagon memo, right?
That's where I found the Pentagon memo. Yes.
Yeah.
And which was still stamped secret when I found it, which was a problem. Most of the other things may have been classified, but were declassified. Essentially, all the data that I was working with at the time was unclassified or declassified. But, you know, there were things that had been classified, but when you read the description, you know, Mrs. So-and-so went out to her garden and saw a light. And I would say, you know, I would tell Dr. Hynek, why does this have to be classified with copies to the CIA, NSA, you know, NRO, and, you know, all those initials? And he would laugh and he would say, well, it was classified because at the time, you know, there was a radar nearby that this thing may have been part of a test of some sort. And it was a new radar, and the radar was classified. I mean, the object itself, nobody cares about. Yeah. Everybody cared about the radar. There was another case of a boat that was, everybody on the boat had seen this object. And, but the object, again, was not very interesting. And when I looked at why it was classified, and by then I had at that time a classified schedule. Well, that boat was, you know, within a mile of the coast of North Korea. And so it wasn't the light that was classified. It was where the boat was. Yeah. It wasn't an ordinary fishing boat. So there are all these things that people will have to learn about the way that stuff works, you know, in the bureaucracy of handling those reports. There are a number of people who've seen something, but they may have seen something in such conditions that they are not going to let them testify.
Right.
You know, because it's too recent, or it's strategic, or they were using, you know, they were using devices that were sensitive, or they were at a particular place that was sensitive. So we may not get just a flood of things all of a sudden. I mean, it's going to be filtered.
Yeah. Do you think
still it's a revolution?
Yeah, but if there is somebody who comes forward from like a legacy program talking about retrieve materials, possible reverse engineering as far as trying to see how the technology works, right? Because they're not going to reverse it. Do you think that would be made public, like in some way, like confirm to the public that there's a material that we didn't develop?
You know, I have no authority on how that kind of speculation would work. but I would think that the public is ready for it now. You know, one reason that maybe, again, who am I to question what the government does? Okay, but there may be reasons that I'm not aware of as a scientist or as an investigator that are good reasons for keeping it secret. But in the old days, yes, there could have been distrust, there could have been panic, local panic, although I don't believe in the big general panic and so on. But I think the public is mature enough to handle that kind of thing, even back in the 60s. But by now, you know, we've had over 500 men and women have gone into space, you know, for extended periods of time. It's no longer the big mystery, you know, something terrible is going to happen. I mean, we have gone to the moon. We have landed on the moon. We've taken things back from the moon. We know that we can go to Mars, even as a commercial, you know, as a commercial project, we could go to Mars. So those are things that have been demystified. The public isn't going to, they may wonder, there may be questions, you know, there are religious questions, there are spiritual questions attached to that that are legitimate, but, you know, it's not going to be, you know, a major surprise for people in most countries.
And as far as speculation, because, you know, you've called it the gifting fields, there's speculations as to whether, you know, anybody, I'll just be more vague and I'll say anybody, I'm not going to say the United States, has either more than just fragments. Like, is there like a full craft somewhere? That's a speculation.
Oh, I think the thing that landed in Trinity, it only lost one panel. That was, and we know what the recovered properties of the material from that panel. And I have similar material from other cases that we're going to study. So it's very strange. It's been compared to fiber optics. I had a chance to talk to Colonel Corso for a couple of days, thanks to Mr. Bigelow and the team. And he described those fibers that he had. It's not fiber optic. It's a little bit more sophisticated than our fiber optic, but it looks like fiber optic. And I have some of it from other cases. That's exactly what the kids at Trinity have described, you know. So those things we need to take to a good lab somewhere. I'm sure other people have done that test. And what I'm not sure, what nobody is sure of, is whether they got anywhere with that study. Because, you know, a classified engineering study is difficult to do. Somebody brings you something out of Czechoslovakia that's supposed to have some strange power. You take it to the lab and you take it apart. It's not obvious that you're going to understand what it does. I've been told by someone who was in that business that you get only about 8 out of 10 cases, you cannot tell what it did. Yeah. You know, it may be just something that it failed, that it didn't work, you know, and that you got a reject. But even if you don't get a reject, you get something that does something, you know, even in electronics. I mean, I go in and out of labs in Silicon Valley, you know, in my work. And usually I go there with someone who explains to me why it works and what it does. But if I had to discover it by myself, I would have to assemble a team of people from different disciplines and work on it for, you know, a couple of months before we could tell why it's put together that particular way. So it may just be that they have different parts of things. Also, for security reason, they wouldn't give you the whole thing. You know, if you're an expert in magnetic memory at IBM, they would give you one thing that looks like a magnetic memory, but they wouldn't give you the propulsion system.
Right.
So
right.
it could be something that comes from a lab in Russia or China or something else, and they wouldn't necessarily tell you where they found it.
Yeah.
It could be one thing, and with that one thing, you couldn't reconstruct the whole, the whole elephant.
Yeah. So, and I wanted to get to something else because you included it, I believe, in the appendix of the Trinity book, and the mention of the Wilson Davis memo.
Yes.
And I know you can't comment on the veracity of it, but when was the first time you saw that memo?
Well, Eric and I were part of a group that met fairly regularly to look at the scientific issues and
Yes.
so on. As you know, I mean, I've published some part of my diaries about that, and I was mainly the computer guy, keeping archives and compiling databases from different places. So I was aware of that memo when we first looked at it, and then we never spoke about it. I think it was up to Eric to disclose it, and he didn't disclose it.
Right.
It came out because Edgar Mitchell, Dr. Mitchell, Captain Mitchell, had a copy in his archives, and it was found after his death. So, no, I mean, we knew about it at least 8 years before it was disclosed.
Yeah, because it was like disclosed in 2019, I believe, but the purported meeting occurred in 2002. And, even Leslie Kane went on the record and said she saw it in 2008. Richard Dolan had seen it in 2006 or 2008, around then as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, so you saw it in the earlier, like the end of the NIDS days.
Yes, in the early 2000s.
And did that influence part of your story and stratagem?
No. Stratagem was, in my mind, an old story. Stratagem is a novel. It's not a very good novel, but it's not a very good novel because I wanted to stay close to a scenario. I thought if I were to build a scenario of what I think has really happened, what would it be? And I didn't want to do it as nonfiction because, most of my writing is nonfiction. And I don't want my readers to be confused, with imagination and so on. But I wanted to write, to take it into a novel that was essentially a scenario. What if it had gone like that?
Yeah.
And where would it have gone? Who would be the people who would be most affected by the existence of, of a parallel civilization somewhere with very advanced physics that was manifesting here? And what would be the things that we would see when it was displayed to us? How would it appear to us? And who would be concerned? Well, the people who would be concerned would be, first line would be the military, which we know it was. Very quickly, the military would say, gee, it's not a threat at our level. I mean, it doesn't shoot us. So, and we've got many other things to do, which is essentially what the Air Force did, and later what the Defense Intelligence Agency did. This is not our job, okay? But it may be real, it's probably real, but, it's not us. And take it to somewhere else. Well, the somewhere else would be the intelligence community, which is well equipped to look at this because it does research in advanced technology, that the Pentagon may not be aware of or interested in. But the people at the end, the people who would have the most to lose about this would be in economics.
Yeah, and
so in the novel, he follows the trail because for a very personal reason, a series of very personal, intense, emotional reasons. He's driven to follow the trail. He's not a super technologist, but the trail leads him to a foreign bank.
Yeah.
Not to, Lockheed, not to IBM, it's been there, but the ultimate test can only be, and I know because of, some of the things I've done in venture capital over 5 different funds, including the NASA venture capital fund at one time.
And that had nothing to do with UFOs, right?
Well, in the novel, it is a UFO. But the technology, the financial community has much better secrecy than anything else you can think of, including the CIA.
Yeah. And there's 2 questions I wanted to ask you about forbidden science. The first question is, in Forbidden Science number 4, you made a journal entry. It said that you had secured a document confirming that the CIA had staged UFO abductions in Brazil and Argentina. Can you, and you don't have to talk about it if you don't feel comfortable, but would you be able to explain the context of that, yes or no? Context.
No, but you can, if you look at James' movie about Brazil, it's pretty good, knowledge that the US was interested or watching the whole thing. When they say in the movie that, the Air Force and NASA went to Brazil I don't think that that's necessarily true, but there are other organizations that would have gone there. I don't see why NASA would have gone there, with that, in that particular incident. But in foreign countries like South America and so on, NASA means some sort of American group came, and they always think it's NASA. As you know, there are many organizations in the US who may have had an interest in it and an interest in space other than NASA. So I think you have to take that with a little bit of humor. But yes, that's happened before.
But that such a document exists that is talking about that kind of the document that you mentioned in the journal, it exists somewhere.
Yeah, interest has existed for a long time in retrieving things that came from other countries, and occasionally exchanging it. Trinity is a good example of that. We took that piece of a craft that was shot over Washington and shared it with Canada.
Yeah, but the document is talking about staging abductions. Is that something completely different than a retrieval?
Well, there would have been interest in that as well.
Yeah. All right. And so do you have a Forbidden Science Volume 5 coming out?
Yes. And, I think of that. I think my readers by now understand that I'm interested in more than UFOs. Yes. I'm interested in life itself. I think life is a remarkable phenomenon. And the things we go through even in our, personal lives, I find them amazing. You know, I mean, not just the coincidences and the things, but how do you know what you know? You know, why do you love the people you love? And how does this happen? And I'm sort of fascinated with that. That's what drove me into research in the first place. UFOs are one of several topics that fascinate me, where I try to learn from, you know, my the better scientist than I am. And I'm going to continue doing that. So I take pains to have not just the edited diary, but also an index and lots of notes for people to use. That's what takes the longest time, is compiling a good index and so on, because those I think of as, you know, and they're not big sales. I mean, very few people are interested in reading a diary. I mean, most diaries are pretty boring, but
not yours. I think your diaries are some of the most explosive in the entire. That's some of the most explosive reading in UFO research is Jacques Vallée's diaries.
Yes, but they, you know, they say, why is he saying this on page 160 where he said the opposite on page 70?
Yeah.
Well, I changed my mind between page 70 and page 160. You know, that's why I changed my mind, because I found something, or somebody showed me why I was wrong. You know, and if I wrote a book about it, you know, that was a textbook and so on, you would not see that. You would not see why that I was wrong, you know, a year before. I would just give you the, you know, the professor's, you know, lecture. And this is the real stuff. So it takes time to index it and to put all the data that people are going to need.
Yeah. So two questions here. For Forbidden Science Volume 5, what years is it going to cover?
It's always 10. It's always 10 years at a time.
Oh, okay. Is it
2000, 2010?
Okay. Wow. So
think of it as a delayed blog. You know?
Yeah. Seriously,
I don't keep a blog. You know, I do it 15 years later.
Yeah. Does that have anything in it about the Wilson Davis memo meeting or anything like that?
I leave that to Eric. I think he's the authority on that, and he knows, you know, what he knows the details. He knows the conditions. I was just, you know, a witness to part of that, and to the discussions that surrounded it, and you know, I have to respect the.
Right. What kind of discussions were around it? Anything that you can talk about respectfully, or no?
I would rather not. I think.
Okay, for sure. I understand.
To Eric.
Yeah, I understand that. And I just have two more questions, really. This is a real kind of side off question, but it's something. It's been a quote that has fascinated me for a long time. And again, you wrote this, I don't know, maybe 50 years ago. I don't know. You have a quote from Messengers of Deception, and it says, we also need to begin a kind of research that will take UFO data as empirical observation and try to use them to initiate an interaction with the UFO phenomenon itself.
Well, you know, people have asked me, there was this case, you know, back, why didn't you go there? You call yourself a ufologist, you call yourself a scientist, and you didn't go there. Well, take the case in Brazil. I mean, I went to a number of places in Brazil, as you know, but I didn't go to that particular place. Well, you know, my response is very clear. I don't do ambulance chasing. You know, just because CNN has been there and NBC has been there and Walter Cronkite is talking about it, doesn't mean I have to jump into an airplane and go there. You know, what am I going to bring? You know, I went to Trinity for a very special reason. That Paola Harris, who is a researcher I respect, and, you know, a good reporter, she's a very, very good interviewer. You know, she relates to people, she loves people, and she did an extraordinary job of recording several times the testimony of the major witnesses in the case. And she invited me into that case that everybody else had given up on. MUFON had given up on it. A number of people had gone there and filmed some stuff and said, well, just a couple of kids. It's not just a couple of kids. You know, it's an incident reported by a bomber pilot 2 days after the capitulation of Japan, 20 miles from the place where the first atomic bomb has opened up a new era in human history. How can you miss that? Okay,
Yeah.
so I went there and I went there again, and I'm going to go there again. Yes, we're tracking that story. As you know, we found one more witness. We're going to find other witnesses as time goes on. We're not going to let go of that story. So, you know, that's my mode of operation. I don't go to, if it's on the first page of the New York Times, I probably wouldn't bring anything to the research. You know, I mean, it's too late. I want to go there, and the cases that stay with me the most and that I continue to work on are cases where the witness has not reported it to anybody, but they've read one of my books or they've seen me somewhere, and they think that I would understand what their family is going through, that I would treat them understanding the trauma, and then I could bring in sensitive experts who could look both at the medical, psychological condition, as well as the material conditions, and not tell anybody if they don't want the story to go out. And those are the cases that that I continue to work on.
Yeah.
And they're not going to be, you know, in a newspaper somewhere until, and they belong to the witnesses. They don't belong to me. And I'm honored to have been part of, you know, of the research.
Yeah. Do you think that there's anything to the idea of, you know, baiting UFOs, either with nuclear instruments and or like an experiencer, somebody who experiences high strangeness?
I've tried to do that, and failed. On the other hand, all kinds of other things have happened that I wasn't necessarily prepared for, that similar to what other witnesses describe, but it wasn't from my baiting anything. No, yeah. I tried to, you know, I built a little observatory in the middle of nowhere where there couldn't be other signals. There could be, I mean, there was no cell phone in the middle of the forest, and hoped that something would happen. A couple of things have happened, but I wasn't the primary witness. And that the phenomenon, whatever it is, has a very strange sense of humor.
Right.
And it places things, I think, if you were to interview Mr. Bigelow, I think he would tell you the same thing. I have a lot of respect for the experiments that Mr. Bigelow has done and for what he's gone through, and the rest of the team, of course, but he himself has, I think, has deeply understood that interaction, the type of interaction that takes place. And it's not a, you know, it's not a regular dialogue. It's much more complex.
Right.
So and that triggers my computer science, you know, background, because some of that would be buried in the databases we've got. And what I'm afraid of, you haven't asked me what keeps me up at night, but what keeps me up at night is that now that those databases are, you know, pretty much out, as you know, we built the mother of all the databases during the BAS project. And people are going to put layers of AI on top of it. And the poor AI is going to go off in all kinds of directions because part of the work, the hard work hasn't been done. Not our fault, but it just wasn't done. So if they put a layer of AI on top of it, it's going to go off in the wrong direction. But if you did it right, and you don't need a lot of data to do it right, then you would get to that level that you're talking about of what the interaction is like at the more subtle level. We've done that to some extent in Trinity by comparing the three cases, you know, of the case in France, of course, in Valençon and Socorro. Now you have three cases with three avocados, you know, no flying saucer in the whole book. The object is an egg-shaped object in all three of those cases. In all three of those cases, the beings that you have excellent witnesses. The witnesses describe the same beings who breathe our air and are humanoid. Now tell that to a biologist. You know.
Well, I was going to say, what do you think that means? I mean, people have like the crypto-terrestrial hypothesis or ultra-terrestrial hypothesis that they're indigenous somehow.
I'm not a biologist. You should ask Dr. Nolan. To me, they look like artificial humans.
Right.
And but they are identical in all three cases. So maybe somebody should look at this, at the correlation. People shouldn't be focused entirely on Trinity. The book is about three cases, two of which are state investigations, not investigations by MUFON or APRO or CUFAS, and although they do a good job, but those were state investigations. The FBI was there at Socorro on another case, but they were interested in the thing and they helped gather the evidence. Socorro, there are things about Socorro in our book that have never been published before and that can put to rest all the stories and all the speculation that it was some sort of hoax. There's no way. And we know that from, you know, the evidence that's brought in our book. And of course, the case in Valençon, I was involved in all three cases now. So I know them fairly intimately. And I've been to the place in Socorro. I was working with Dr. Heineck at the time. You know, I was at Northwestern at the time and part of the team. Of course, I've gone to Valençon. I've met the witness and I've met the other witnesses who've never testified. And again, in the Midi of France, you know, in the south of France, when people see something like that, they're not terribly interested in talking to the police. They are going to keep it as their, you know, a signal to them of something very personal, and you have to gain their confidence before you can do that. And what strikes me now is that there are a lot of people, you know, before Congress and so on, who've never investigated a case on the ground with the witnesses when it rained or when it snowed and so on, and done their hard work. And those are those people exist, and they need to be brought in before Congress. And they will tell you that Congress has only looked at 5 or 10% of the cases because I've only looked at the military cases. Military cases are in special circumstances. They are very good because of the sensors involved and the quality of the pilots and the observers. What about the other 90%?
Yeah, 99%.
Anybody going to look at them?
Yeah. And I just have one more question. The idea of like UFOs and consciousness and an interaction, like, you know, people will say they can do a meditation and have a UFO interaction from that.
I would not question their, their personal impression of that. I'm not really qualified to assess, whether that was true or not. If you could do that in the lab, monitoring the brain, you would know more. But I don't think you could answer that question to the satisfaction of most, even most brain experts. You should talk to Dr. Green about that, because he's done those experiments. And a number of his colleagues in medicine have done those experiments. I don't know where that stands today.
Yeah, because I mean, I don't know, what you could pick up on the brain, but say you were able to do it and you were able to track anomalous activity in the field. Would that even be helpful, or is that still like there's nothing you can do with that data?
I would, if somebody does the experiment, I'd be interested in learning about it, but that's all I could do, would be learn from that. I've looked into about 70 or 80 abduction cases, but always through experts, not by myself doing hypnosis or anything like that.
Right.
And some of the experts I brought in were hypnotists, but they were also experts in the brain. And I've never published any of that because I don't think I can. First, the field is so confused today that it would be just one more drop of confusion on top of everything else. People have very, personal ideas about it, and it's almost a religious thing. And I don't think I could add anything that would help the research. It will have to be picked up by experts from a different direction.
Yeah. Well, Jacques, it's really been an honor having you on. Do you have any parting words for the audience?
Yes. We have to change gear, because the old attitudes of stigma and so on have been removed. I mean, there was that meeting in the National Cathedral in Washington with the head of intelligence, the head of astronomy at Harvard, and the head of NASA, and a couple of other people saying, this is not something we understand. It's a new phenomenon. There should be no ridicule. There should be no stigma attached to people who have done research on it or have testified personally about seeing those things. It's a new era for research. So we are on day one, of the new research. And I'm very grateful that I'm still alive to see it, at my advanced age. I think of, with sadness at people like Dr. MacDonald and Dr. Hynek and many others who were hoping to see that day and worked to bring it about and couldn't see it. But we see it, and it's a great, it's a great gift. It's wonderful.
It is, but again, thank you so much, Jacques, for coming on. And, everybody go check out Jacques' his newest book, Trinity, The Best Kept Secret. And I hope to speak to you again soon.
My pleasure.
Take care.
Bye-bye.